And I think we are going. We'll leave this bit in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mini of the Month podcast hosted by the, I suppose we are the Squiddage community, or the Age of Squidmarth community, or the Squidmarth Miniatures community, whatever we're called these days. It changes weekly. And I am hosting this one. I am Steffan of the moderation team, and I'm joined, as ever, by Huskotron, my noble co-host in this regard. And for today, we are going to be looking at the Mini of the Week nominations, and indeed winners, that have been chosen over the past month, and just showcasing their work, shining a light onto them so that all of you can see them in case you missed them the first time, or indeed if you're not part of the Discord community, so you can see them too. Husk, how are we doing today?
You're doing great. Looking forward to this one because I remember some of the submissions last month, and I was very pleased with some of them. I was pleased with all of them, but some of them tickled me quite a lot.
We did have a very good month, and for those that are unfamiliar with it, in case this is either your first time watching one of these, or indeed you're just unfamiliar with the process in the first place, on the Discord server, every single week, we of the moderation team randomly select one of us, and we will pick a miniature of the week that has been posted in the server chat that we just believe is either needs showing off, it has been painted sort of like to our tastes, or just is something that we really enjoyed. And we select them every week, and then at the end of the month we do a little podcast to just summarise all of them. If you want to be involved, all you need to do is be a member of the Discord server, which is available via Patreon. And I'm sure that if you go onto the Squidmarth Miniatures channel, there are links abound for it, so you can easily find it there.
Yes. All right, I'm going to share my screen.
Marvellous.
And we will get started with Des.
So this one was my week, if memory serves. It has been a little while since we did these ones. But I remember this one, that when it first came up, they'd only just joined the server, and they were saying that this is a miniature that they had painted for somebody, I believe it was a gift, and they were going for the general theme was to make it look like a birthday cake, and I think they pulled that off very well.
Yes.
The use of sprinkles on the armour is inspired. I'm not quite sure what it is all over the base and the shield, but we'll call it frosting because it looks like that. But just the commitment to that aesthetic works really, really, really well. And just as a gift, it's nice, but also just as a miniature to look at, it works even better because it's not something that you see every day. It's not your standard Space Marine.
It is a miniature. It is a mini version of they committed to the bit.
They really did.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I especially love the frosting that's on the hilt for the sword.
It does look very good. I mean, it reminds me a little of, for anyone who played Gears of War 2, and this is a strange connection, but as you're fighting out of the giant worm, you would expect all the stuff that was inside the worm as they break out of it. It reminds me of that. Just replace the worm with a cake, and you then have that effect.
The Space Marine fought out of the cake fortress.
Yeah.
I like that. It was excellent work, though.
But that was the first of our honourable mentions, and next we had Nick at Night again, another new person to the server, although I am familiar with their work from other servers, and, well, I mean, just look at it. It's lovely. We have the amazing work onto the base. It looks like you could warm your hands by it.
My question is that are the runes sculpted in and then filled with ink, or is that something they freehanded everything on? It almost looks like it's recessed based on how they painted it.
It
but
does.
I'm not sure.
I'm not either, and I wouldn't want to go on either way of it, because it might be, if it is freehand and we say it's recessed, we're really underplaying their abilities, and if it is recessed and it's we say it's freehand, I mean, it's still excellent either way.
It's excellent. I'm just curious because the whatever effect they were going for, they executed it well.
Oh, they really did. And the thing that I also love just about the base is the fact that the head of the skeleton is separate from the rest of it.
Yep, it's in the middle of one of the runes.
It has a really nice just sort of story to it, where you can just imagine, well, why is the head very perfectly in that area? And I'm going to go, just because we've been playing Diablo recently, sacrifice of some sort.
Something
like
got chopped off and landed in the rune.
It could be.
I'm particularly fond of the way, and it may be the lighting they chose to take the photo in, or it may be the way that they highlighted these wings specifically. But I'm very fond of the way the wings go from like a brighter blue and then out to this black. And it looks like they have a darker color underneath each of these little prongs, and they
Mm.
highlighted the top of each one like brighter, is what it kind of looks like to me. But I don't know if I can't tell if that's just my eyes playing tricks on me because of their lighting, or if they highlighted it that way. And I'm going to believe that it was highlighted that way.
I would angle on the more of it being highlighted, just because if we look at the rest of the miniature we have, like on the folds of the cape, on all of the
Mm-hmm.
fabric details, there is very distinct highlighting of the light hitting from below, and indeed of just having some inner light from on the robes and on the less so on sort of like whatever it's called, the sort of I don't know, is it a stole or something that he's wearing? It's a very busy model,
It
but
is.
just of having all of the very sort of nice and clear highlights onto it, just really to show off that they have thought about where they want all of the light to be coming from. So
Yeah, I really like that model a lot.
it's very pretty.
That is not how I would have envisioned painting it, but I think they executed it really well with the black on the tips makes it look like the wings are actually like a halo around his head.
Which
A
works
little bit
really
to
well
me.
given the that they are supposedly sort of more angelic, obviously with more lightning these days, and getting grimmer and grimmer with each edition, as is
Oh
expected.
yes.
But
They're
yeah, it
getting
works.
corrupted by their power.
They are rightly so too, and it works just really nicely as a centerpiece model for an army. It really stands out, and if it is part of an army, I would quite like to see the rest of it. Definitely
Oh,
not
same.
steal the paint scheme,
Oh, not at all. Just
though. No.
inspiration from it.
Yes.
And then next we have Griff with their winning Mini of the Month entry.
Mm. And as I said, when I picked this one, it takes a very brave man to do checkerboard on the legs of a miniature. And that goes whether it's for the 32mm Harlequin or indeed for the 75mm scale one from Chimera. And
Oops, that was my fault.
yeah, that's right. And the just it's been pulled off really well. Now, obviously, some inspiration has been taken by Sergio Calvo's original box art, but if there's somebody that you're going to take inspiration from, he's somebody that you do. And the fantastic sort of like the detail onto the checkers to get them so that they're all straight and that they look right, having the two different sizes on each leg, the lighting on the various parts of the armor and from the roof, making sure that things stay in shadow. It all just worked really, really, really nicely.
I actually really like the way that the shading on this side of the mask is
Mm.
quite a bit darker than this, so it makes it look like the light's coming from this direction.
It works like amazingly well, especially with and which part was it? Yes, the just sort of like on the collar where you can see that the where the hood is sort of slightly folded over, that there is that highlight onto there. We have the cold onto one side, followed by the very sort of like the warmer light from the other direction. It just works really well, and it's a great example of how to do the two contrasting light temperatures in a very small space.
Yeah, and I really like the way they did their highlighting. The way that
Mm.
it's done in more of a stippling pattern as opposed to
Yes,
being perfectly blended. I think it works really well for this particular model.
it
Is that
reminds me actually quite.
I was trying to figure out if that's I thought that was writing, but it looks like it's just highlight markings. But from a
Yeah, I think it's
distance,
some
it
sort of.
looked almost like it was some kind of writing.
I mean, it could be. I don't think we'll make a decision on either way because it could easily be writing, and the fact that it could be just is more props to how well it's painted. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, the overall design scheme just worked really, really, really nicely for it, and it just sort of really stood out to me for that week. But yeah, so that was our mini of the week for the first week of June.
Yes. Next, we have the first honorable mention from the second week, and this is There Might Be Monsters. And the way that they painted this miniature is so interesting to me. I like the highlighting and the way they chose to pull out the volumes of this sleeve.
Mm,
And then the base is so cool too with the airbrushed circuit pattern, like the little
it,
tree.
It reminds me a lot of Deus Ex.
Mm-hmm.
Like sort of and to shamelessly plug our previous podcast that we recorded, if you want to see another version of this miniature, you can see what artists
Spring
created
has
for
sprung.
that one. Indeed, also hosted by two unfamiliar faces, wink wink, and just the what really show off between the two things is I believe they painted them together, and that it was a sort of like a group effort where lots of people painted the same bust to see the different versions of it. But the thing that I just love about this one, even taken independently of all of the others, it just shows how versatile as a bust that it is, because you can paint it in any number of ways and it will show a very different story to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this one, we have the colder colours contrasted with some of the sort of slightly warm bits, the red eyes. The one that the previous one that we looked at was a more sort of natural and, if anything, a slightly more quotidian expression onto the bust, whereas for this one we do get that more cyberpunk sci-fi kind of level for it, which works really, really nicely for it.
Yeah, and I would never have thought to do the eyes in almost solid color, but it really gives her an ethereal quality to her.
Mm.
Um,
And it's like the thing that always sort of like draws my eye for it is it's that one highlight just on the banding of the thing, just where I think is it just where it meets the leg.
oh, this, right?
Yes, that bit. It's a very sharp highlight, but it follows where the light would hit for all the rest of it. So while on another miniature, it could be considered where it's sort of like it's too bright and it's not been blending out. Just with this part, it's in exactly the right place where it just follows the overall light scheme of the rest of it, and it even ties with the plinth as well. So that works
Yeah,
really, really
it
well.
it makes it look extremely glossy in a very nice way, and the funny thing that I've noticed in very good reflective reflective materials when they're painted on, you can tell that a lot of the time that highlight isn't blended. It's hardly
Yes.
blended at all, and that makes all the difference when you're looking at a very reflective surface. So,
Yeah.
excellent work there.
And that's the first of our honourable mentions. Also, for those that aren't familiar, honourable mentions are just sort of like they're the ones that we wanted to give Mini of the Week to. They were just others available and we couldn't really pick between them. But
Yep.
all of these are showing, it's not to say there's anything bad about them being an honourable mention. They're still fantastic miniatures. And if anything, we could have picked any of them for Mini of the Week. It's just the fact that we were all
Oh yes,
indecisive.
and a lot of the time there are way more than just three that
Oh,
we could
yeah.
choose. There are some weeks where it is incredibly hard to pick for this.
And
Um,
quite often we are limited by the Discord character limit as opposed to the number of entries. And Dennis telling us off, that also happens. And
True.
he can try to deny it, but we know it's true.
Speaking of Dennis, this
Yes.
is Dennis's scheme that he has cooked up for his Kroot, and
Mm.
I am actually very impressed by this scheme. I really like the orange skin with the purple shadows, and the blue tips on the spikes is just such a nice choice of contrast. And then you've got the guns painted in a more realistic color scheme so that it kind of
Yeah,
grounds them in reality. So it looks like these could really be existing somewhere.
it does look. It's sort of like it reminds me of. Did you ever see? Is it John Carter, the rather disappointing Disney film?
I think so.
It reminds me of the aliens in there, where there is that kind of. They do seem very much based in real life with their color scheme and their design, but there is again the as I should put my literary hat on for a moment. As Darko Subin would say, there is that level of cognitive estrangement to it, whereby we recognise the familiar in it, but it's there is still something alien about it that means that we can acknowledge that it's not quite human, and that's what we're focusing on. But then
Yes.
having the guns in order to bring it back where you can quite clearly identify the aspects of the human to it, it just works really nicely as that lovely contrast to it, plus contrasting colours too.
Yes, the orange and blue is one of my go-to choices when I want something that's going to pop. And I think he did great. I can't wait to see a full
Oh, definitely.
contingent of Kroot with this.
Will you be painting
Next, we
yours in a
have
similar fashion? I know you have some Groot.
perhaps. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with my Kroot yet. I might shy away from my standard choice of painting with Jade
Ooh.
from pro acrylic.
Well, I wouldn't say we go that far.
It's like oh, he's using jade again. Oh no.
Hey, I
But
spent
this
a
one,
year painting things purple. Speaking of purple,
speaking, and then they have probably something similar to jade here in the arm too.
they do.
Um,
See, it was almost a segue.
so almost, we made it a segue.
We did.
This is from Witness My Minis, and I should note that their Instagram handle, the E here, is not supposed to be there. There was a minor typo when typing on top of this photo, but that's okay. This one, I'm blown away by this whole paint scheme. The choice of colors, the contrast, the way they've tied it in with the base, the choice to use a real stick as a log was an excellent choice, and then painting it so that it's not just a stick on a base.
It's one that, to quote the fantastic Goobertown minis, it's one to just sit there and marvel at for a bit. There's
Mm-hmm.
so much that you can learn from. With just how colour has been worked, how the various different, even the way that the highlights have been placed. For instance, if we look at his fist onto the log, having the horizontal highlights onto it to show that where the skin would have been stretched, and then the vertical highlights on the arm to so that even the shape of them follows the just the way that the eye would go onto it. And
Mm-hmm.
then with the direct contrast between the runes and the skin, it just had lots of just visual treats for the eye. And as well with the log, I mean, that's a huge part of it, and it works really, really nicely. Doesn't fall into the usual trap of using sort of real bits of twig where you can just glue it on and think, well, it looks like a log because it's made of wood, so I'll just leave it as is. And then when you come to actually take photos
Yep.
of it, you realise, oh, it's got lots of extra shiny bits to it that I didn't intend. You may
It's
wonder how
just a
I know
stick
it's
on
because
a
I've
on a
done that in the
base.
past.
Oh, me too. The other thing I really like is as you get further down on the model, it appears like the saturation drops. So it
Yes.
really draws your attention to this face, which I can't tell if those are ears or if that's something else. I think it's ears.
I
I'm
They
never
could
I'm never
be
quite
it.
sure what to make of this model. Just the sculpt in general. I'm sometimes not sure what to make of it. But it's a good
It's
thing because it's
yeah.
very out there.
And I think of
Um,
because it is, and I agree that the model itself is busy, but in sort of like the best possible way. And I think for there's a lot of sort of ways to paint it, and there's no real wrong way to paint it. But I think just with this one, it's added some not sort of like sort of necessarily organization to it with the paint scheme, but it helps to unify some of the elements that may in previous sort of like iterations be quite disparate in a way. So with
yeah.
having the skin and being a whole kaleidoscope of colors, and then having lots of different things on the, say, the antlers and the stone and the branches and all of that, it can seem overwhelming to the eye. And so, yeah, it'll be really impressively painted, as indeed most of them are. But just focusing in on certain parts then becomes really tricky to do, and you often get distracted. Whereas with this one, it's very probably the skin is the most, for lack of a better term, alien thing there. All of the rest of it seems fairly normal, and so you can identify what all of them are at a glance, which works really, really well.
Excuse me. And I'm actually also a huge fan of the the way they did the shell because the
Mm.
shell is done in a similar color to these glowing runes.
Yes, I
So it
hadn't
kind of
noticed that
ties that
before.
in.
Mm.
So it kind of ties in the two parts of the model together. And I don't know
Yeah,
if that was intentional or not, but I'll give it to them as intentional.
we'll say
And
that it
then
is.
this little guy here, I love the little guy standing on the antlers. It looks like
Yeah.
with a little flower above it. I think that's on this, perhaps.
Mm.
But it's such a cool model. And then it's got the nice skeleton that looks like it's one of the skeletons from the Soulblight
Looks like the
Grave
Cursed City.
Lords.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it looks like one of the
Uh,
Cursed City skeletons, which is such a cool
mm.
little detail on the model. Um,
I was going to say also just along with the color scheme and everything, it reminds me a lot of Labyrinth in a way. Just
yes.
having the large thing that you can imagine a Ludo-esque thing wandering around, followed by all of just the little things bouncing around. It works
Yeah.
really, really nicely.
It's a really cool model, and I think they knocked it out of the park.
Definitely. And obviously they have a huge channel anyway. If you want to see probably how they painted it, I think they did a video, and if they didn't, there's plenty others on their channel, so go watch them. I know I do. So it's
Yes, they're very good at what they do. It's a practiced
yes,
skill.
we're definitely not jealous.
Not at all.
Another
Next,
honourable mention.
this is my week that I chose.
Oh,
So I picked this as one of my honorable mentions. I thought the Imperial Fists were done extremely well. Yellow is an exceptionally challenging color to do on an
it is.
entire group of models. And the shadows work really well. They're nice and brown, which is a color that a lot of people don't think to use when they're using shadow colors for yellow. So there's that nice brown shadow with the bright yellow on the top. And I think the way they've done the bases really ties the whole thing together. Overall, I think this was excellent. And I'm not
It
usually a
works
fan of Space
really
Marines.
well. No, I mean I'm not, but I mean just looking at them, there's as similar as I've been saying to a lot of the other ones. There's a lot of visual interest for whoever's looking at them, and I think as well it also works with how they've been arranged onto the base as well, because it looks like and it reminds me a lot of sort of like the Golden Demon squad setups that a lot of people do, where you don't necessarily need to go over the top with the plinth because just putting them together works nicely. And I think with having
Yes.
both squads of both the regular Space Marines and the Terminators, both of them could be taken as separate ones, but just together, it's just even more to enjoy about it.
Yeah,
And
it looks like
especially
it's
with
a
just
shield. It looks like it's a shield
yeah,
line of Terminators with the Space Marines taking cover behind them and using them as
yeah,
supporting units.
just
It's
awaiting the
great.
inevitable onslaught of Tyranids.
Something.
Yeah,
Or vice versa.
or vice versa. Probably more likely. But yeah, just there's so much sort of like all the detail. It's very clean. Everything's very crisp. The highlights are in exactly where you would expect them to be. Obviously, as you said, the shading really well done.
With the
Yeah,
scratches too.
yeah, just all the weathering works so nicely for them.
And I think they may have sponged on some of the yellow for these hit plates,
Mm,
which I think it works really well because it makes it
it
look like they're
does.
grimy.
Does it works nicely? And as going back to just the way that they've shaded it all, with a lot of sort of when painting yellow, it's very tempting to just sort of think, right, yellow is the main color. I want something to be darker. Darker color is obviously black or mixed with that, and then that has a tendency to go rather muddy. But ironically, using brown works really, really well. So adding orange to it and having a warmer shadow for it can really help to just sort of help accentuate all of the yellow parts of it, as they have done really, really well.
Yeah. And as we were talking about before we
Yes.
started the podcast, I think this little pink poof on the occasional base is just such a good choice.
Yes.
Um, it makes the bases interesting because it's not every single one, so it doesn't feel uniform. So it's a very nice touch.
And yeah, it's just that little element of visual interest that can just really, because it draws the eye to the miniature, but then it's always they've placed them really well. I'm not sure if let's say it was intentional again, but it could have been by accident because it works as well. But it's always in a place where the light would naturally be hitting too.
Yeah,
So it draws your attention more to the highlights, which works really nicely just to pull the eye of whoever's looking at it, which again, very well executed.
I think they did a great job. And actually, I think they're planning on working on a full Space Marine
Ooh.
army with this theme. So hopefully, they give us a full army photo when they're done.
Hopefully they will, and no doubt they will probably be featured on this again. So,
Probably. Next, we have Wheeler's Minis. The what's not to like about this one? I really enjoy the choice to have the lightning arcing across the back of this thunder lizard. The way that's highlighted around the lightning is so interesting. Um, they took a miniature that could have been okay, and the
yeah,
lightning really, to me, turns it in from an okay mini to a really fun mini.
yeah, just
Um,
the way that it's been highlighted as well really gives the impression that you've got all of the lightning just coruscating over the body of it. It doesn't necessarily seem like just the way that you might have seen like traditional draconic things doing if they are breathing lightning, that it's just sort of one sudden burst of it. Having the fact that it's interacting with other parts of the mini, and you can't necessarily see as to whether, because it might not even necessarily be that it's breathing lightning in this case, it could just be this is a side effect of something. And it works really well for not only the presentation of the mini, but it just helps with little aspects of story to it. And again, similarly that we had with somebody else's, probably witnessed my minis actually, of linking various colours around it in spot highlights. Again, having the eye in that same bright blue as all of the lightning just really helps to tie it all together, which especially it could go the other direction as well, where it is perhaps too busy at that level, because with that number of legs, things generally do tend to get a bit busy with that kind of thing.
Yep.
But it's kept very, very subdued with very careful point highlights and careful use of colour in order to just draw the eye where it needs to go. So yeah, really, really, really well done.
And I feel like a lot of people think I'm strange when I say this, but I'm actually very impressed with the way they did the rock.
I was just about to say the rock itself works because again it's the same grey palette as indeed the rest of the lizard, but it still looks as a separate thing from it,
Mm-hmm. It's
which again has
distinct.
been done really, really well.
Yeah, and I imagine this is me thinking back to my own stone recipe, right? But I imagine they did a base color and they put some other colors underneath it, and then they dry brushed the brighter colors on. Because I've found that that's a really good way to get very convincing rock.
Yes, and it also adds just those other little, I suppose, flavors of interest to the color as well, where you just get a little bit of sort of like there could be like a little bit of blue, some brown, or anything like that. But then
Hmm.
having a unifying highlight over it, just one helps it just all look consistent, but it doesn't detract from having all of those colors. And if anything, having even some that are tonally a bit clashing can really help to sort of one bring them together, but also still just add those little bits of visual interest to it, which again works really, really nicely.
Oh yeah, I often use orange ink.
Oh.
I'll use green, blue, orange, red, brown, and I will just dab them all over whatever rock I'm doing, and then I dry brush it all the way up again. And it's a weird way to make it look like it looks like the rock has existed in a place for a long period. So different
Hmm.
things have settled in different recesses and made different colors on one surface. And it looks like they did a little bit of that on this too, with some of the colors in here. They may have done like it looks like there's a tiny bit of brown back here in that little alcove, so it's
Yeah,
very
which
nice.
just as an overall piece, it works really just really nicely for all of it, and it's the mark of a good piece when you can spend hours looking at it and just think, oh, that's something else new about it. And I mean,
Yes.
we could probably spend ages doing it. We're sort of going over even just the little highlights on each of the claws, just for adding that temperature contrast of having the cold grey next to the warm sort of beige colour.
Hmm.
Works just really nicely as well. It's yeah, lovely, lovely
Yeah,
mini.
excellent work. Next, we have the mini of the week. This was NEP. Um, I think usually I see a lot of the time with the uh, Soulblight Grave Lords, people do either very dull, muted color palettes, or they'll do really bright color palettes. And it feels
Yeah,
like with NEP's piece here, they took the middle ground of that. So
yeah,
you've got the nice kind of muted color palette at the top, and then you've got that wonderful fleshy color. It almost looks like sickened flesh
yeah.
on both of the wings, and then you have this wonderful OSL with the green glowing fluid coming down off of the base and lighting up the little uh,
Yeah.
it's like a wrist, I guess. I don't remember. My bad anatomy is not as good as it was. Um, but yeah, it's so good. And then you've got even on the loincloth, you've got the green right here. It's they did
Mhm.
such a great job with the OSL. It's not too bright, but it's also not too dull. It's
Yes.
just enough.
And it's like having that underlighting as well. Like as you say, I very much agree. Where a lot of the Soulblight stuff, it is either very, very bright, because let's face it, well, Twilight has had that effect. If vampires are going to be there, they're going to sparkle, or indeed going for that rather grim way of doing it, and having that nice combination between them. Because I mean, now that we're zoomed in, we can see that like the more human elements are they're still very subdued. They're very dark. They're a bit grim in a way. The just the very muted color scheme for it, followed by the more of the sort of draconic, or I suppose chiropteran, with them being soul blight, having those elements being brighter and indeed stranger, combined with the underlighting from the OSL, it just helps to make it seem very otherworldly, but still also that there is something a bit kind of sinister and menacing about it, where it seems like a monster. Where
Yes.
in other cases, if depending on how you were to go for it, it could be highlighted in a very different way, where it actually would lose that menace. And as well, with taking what is a very busy model and can make it again seem very unified and very it just sort of it works just to make it look all consistent throughout it.
Yeah. The other thing that I'd noticed, I really like. I don't know if this was overspray or an accident or whatnot, but I think it's actually a really cool little detail. The little specks of bright
Mm,
green, where it seems like maybe a little bit of white got there, and then
yeah,
when the OSL was sprayed over, it picked up those little spots of white to make it look like whatever this fluid is got on the bat's wings, and
yeah,
it's
sort of like
actually
little
really
splashes of
cool.
sort of like just glossy stuff from it, which works really nicely.
Uh, yeah, this model, I think before I picked Mini of the Week, I looked at this one for a good amount of time,
Mm,
and just the bruising on the inside of the wing with the
yeah,
shadows that they've chosen. It's so good. Um, and then
and
the
actually,
base ties it together quite nicely too.
yeah, I mean, going back to the wings, it's actually given me an idea of something that I was struggling on my flesh eater quartz that I was painting the other day. So
Mm.
I might have to steal that idea as a something for the wings. But yeah, it reminds me just of the overall composition of it. It reminds me a lot of the cover of Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell 3, with the
Mm.
fantastic Julie Bell artwork with the light coming from the offside and all of that. And it now just needs a barbarian on a motorbike riding through the foreground, and it will be perfect. So
Have him driving away from this thing, right?
yeah,
Or toward it. That works
or
too.
towards it. You never know.
This I like this model a whole lot. I would
Yeah,
love the opportunity at some point to pick it up and turn it and look
yeah.
at it
Just
up
seeing it from all
close.
angles would be amazing.
Next, we have an adorable little kobold mage from who are we? It is hold on. It's fastest heretic on the block,
Ah,
and I think they did a great job with this.
mm,
The little kobold is adorable. I like the how shiny all the metal is on them. Um,
yeah,
and I think the choice to use semi gloss paints. I don't know if they're using Citadel paints or not, but the semi gloss for the red makes it look very like scales.
yeah. It's that really nice. Just you see that light is catching on it, and while in some cases the like having a sort of satiny finish onto them it can look a little bit out of place, just and for certain miniatures it can just make it look like a miniature. In this one it really works, and it seems, and in the best possible way, it reminds me quite a lot of just like the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon series, of like
Yes.
the very sort of like the very distinct lighting of it, and that it could be that there's like it's about to turn around and give a villain monologue, that, and for all that it works really really nicely. Plus also reminds me just of the color palette of it. It reminds me quite a lot of just Baldur's Gate, like
Mm-hmm.
of the just the colors that are used, the fact that you've got the very like the black outer robe and the muted areas, but then also having the pops of the red and the magenta and indeed the blue of the crystal. It just works really really nicely for it.
I when you mentioned Baldur's Gate 3, the moment I was thinking, okay, so we could have a kobold villain who's a wizard who speaks like Popper
Yes, and steals things.
and steals things. But
There we
I
go. One
really
shot for
liked
all of you
this.
aspiring DMs out there.
Exactly right. We is nice. Um, Next, we have Maxterments with this
Ah,
little Gandalf. I
mm.
believe it's Gandalf, it's supposed to be. But
If
it
it isn't
looks,
Gandalf, it's somebody doing a very good cosplay of Gandalf.
exactly. I like the glow on this gem. I think they did a
Yeah.
really good job making the gem look like it's got light coming in from the top of it. The robes are excellent. I don't think. I mean, the way that they've done, it looks like they've used an ink wash or a wash to do a lot of the
Yeah, I
shading on
think
it, and
it's
then maybe dry brushed over the top of it.
yeah, I would
Um,
have said it's sort of like a wash or perhaps a contrast paint or anything like that, and then just a very subtle and slow build up of the dry brushing in order to get into all of the little nooks and crannies, but not necessarily covering over them too much, so that you do get like the little patches into the robe where it has split a little and all of that, because it really then looks like textured fabric, because it looks almost sort of velveteen at that point. It's
yeah, that's what I was going
really
to say.
nice.
It looks like a really soft fabric, like you'd imagine a wizard wearing.
Mm,
And then on top of that, I think the face is actually done very well.
it really is.
It's zooming in, you can see the eyes are even. It looks like they've done pupils.
Which is impressive in its own right.
Considering the
And
angle, you usually have to hold your brush for an eyeball.
yeah, I can imagine that they probably held the miniature upside down. And the other thing as well, and I'm guessing here at this point, but because the skin is so unified, it would almost lead me to believe that they probably did those eyes on their first try, which I'm
Yes.
very envious of. And I think
Oh
that
yeah.
is one of the signs of the apocalypse. So thanks, Max. But there's some really, really lovely aspects to it. Like the skin work, like the paleness of it makes him seem sort of like quite old. The beard just contrasts really nicely. Everything
and
just has a really nice texture to it, which is
and
really
I
difficult to pull off
think
on miniatures that small.
I don't know if they used contrast paint to shade the beard, but it looks like
Ooh.
they if they did use contrast paint, they might have used like Pilar Glacier to
Mm,
make it have that very subtle blue in all the recesses, but keep most of the white.
yeah,
It looks like a wispy old beard, right?
it does. It's what mine's
It's
going to
really
turn into
good.
in a few years. Um,
I don't have the patience to grow a beard that long, but
uh,
um, it gets itchy and then I have to shave it. But that's a really I really enjoyed this model.
It was, and again, something that we've the base as well. Like just
Yes,
the static grass works really nicely for it. It looks like just it
it
could
has different
be,
colors too, which is
yeah,
usually you see it's just a uniform color for the static grass as opposed to being different colored tufts. So
yes,
that's excellent too.
and it works with, again, assuming that it is Gandalf. It works just with, if anything, it works with how they filmed it in New Zealand, just of having the very soft lighting affecting it all. In that there could be an eagle flying over at any second. It works just really, really nicely.
Very very well done. And then we have our last one of last month. This is
Ah,
by Okuhaku. He when he was doing this model, he mentioned he wanted to try and recreate a painting in the 3D space, and
yes,
he did a very good job of executing the painting on a 3D model. Um,
definitely.
I actually do like that because he took the model and he put it into a little shadow box and then put a
Mm.
frame around it. And I like that he did the little signature on the back as kind of a nod to the original artist.
Yes, and it's like having because obviously, I mean, it's very, very clear the inspiration from Dishonored game series, which if you haven't played it, do because they're great. But just it has a very distinct art style. It reminds me, well, a lot of their concept art does anyway. It reminds me of how the art style in things like Disco Elysium was actually pulled off, but of course, with
Yes,
Dishonored being more 3D. Um, and just having it's very much a style of distinct and very clear brushstrokes. So everything is done with a purpose, and you can really see that on just, especially with the face, where just with the cheekbones, especially the using the brushstrokes in order so that it is a sharp highlight just under the eyes, so that where normally if you were looking at them and you think, right, need to make them soft because otherwise it will look very, very staggered and it will make him look sort of like more haggard and if anything a bit sort of odd. In this case, the oddness is still there, but that's intended. where it
Yes.
is very, very clear. And indeed, there is something haunting about the eyes. It looks like that they do follow you as you turn the picture around. But
Yes.
yeah, just it is again. It's one that as soon as you from a distance, it works excellently as being a just a nod to the original concept art. Or if you've not encountered the concept art, it still just looks like a really nicely painted bust. But
Yes.
then as you zoom into it and you can see all of the brushstrokes, it's something that you can just look at as how to build up various skin tones. Reminds me actually quite a lot of the works of Mark Masklands, whose name I'm
Yes.
probably mispronouncing. Um, the just having all of those deliberate brushstrokes in order to show the build-up of skin tone that then obviously in his case he smooths them over to make it look all smooth, but you don't need to, as indeed Oku has demonstrated in this.
Yeah. I also like on the black hair how he's placed the
Yes.
highlight across the front here, as opposed to most people would
Mm.
put the highlight up here. In
Yeah, I
this,
know
it's
I wouldn't. It
directly on
probably
the
wouldn't
front.
look as good.
Yeah,
And as well with the
it's
like,
very convincing that it got a front light on him as
yeah,
opposed to a top light.
which I suppose it again, it's very similar to how like portrait painting would have originally happened, where they would have the light coming in for the like to highlight the face to make it look good. So it's and again with the even painting it on with like the fill lights on the temples and everything, they fill lights, no rim lights, that's the word,
Yes.
to make them look good and having the now I'm probably misusing technical terms here, so if people do know the actual ones. They can correct me, obviously, as I'm sure you will if you do. But having the, I believe it's called like the Terminator between the lights going towards the hair, where it is that sort of darker shadow to show where the light is ending. It's achieved really subtly, especially and again under the brows with all the shadows. It just works really, really well to show sort of like just a careful and deliberate use of color and various light sources onto it.
Yes. I think and I think it looks like he took a regular canvas or a regular frame, like a picture frame,
Mm.
and painted gold on the inside. And it's a
Yeah,
nice little framing device to make the viewer go, this is what I need to look at.
yeah. And it provides. I think it's in the film industry where they do have that kind of like the shaded edges around the edge of something. Just having that
Mm-hmm.
vignette specifically, um, sort of there, it really does help to demarcate where you want the eye to go to. And obviously, if you want to see more examples of this, obviously I know Oku's doing some more, but lots of people have picked up the idea of putting things into a frame. I believe it was Roman Lapat that first came up with them, but somebody might have predated him, but of just using them as well for they can often become like a little busy, I suppose, with them because you want to cram as much into the frame to show off how much you've thought about and all of that, and they do generally look excellent. But there is something really sort of just nice in the simplicity of this one, where it is just one figure into it. And again, even if you'd not seen any of the concept art of Dishonored or anything like that, it would give me even sort of slight Hammer horror vibes, I suppose, where I would have thought that, or just where you can imagine that probably it would have been reaching out of the painting eventually, and probably
Yeah.
voiced by Vincent Price or something like that. But yeah, works really nicely for it.
Yeah, I think he did a good job. If I hadn't known that it was based on some art that he was wanting
Mm.
to use as a learning exercise, um, I wouldn't be able to tell.
No, because it works.
Um,
It's a nice. It's a nice paint job in its own right. Where
yes.
if again, if you've not encountered Dishonored at all, or you've not encountered any of the concept art, or even if you've just seen it in passing but not really engaged with it, kind of thing, you would still be able to look at it and think that's a good piece. And
Yes.
especially even for just like the highlights on the shoulders, for where it looks like it's sort of slightly backlit in that regard.
Hmm.
Even that alone is a good sort of use of lighting and color and all of that. So it's
Well,
a lovely example of.
now that you mention that, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's all right.
The key lighting on the collar as well.
Yeah,
It's very good framing of the character to make it look like he is flat on the canvas.
yeah, and has a nice amount of separation with the background as well, which works really nicely.
Yeah.
See, I think just from a technical aspect, it's one that I think everybody can learn from about how to like color zones of a face, lighting, where to place your shadows, where to do all of these things. It works really well, but then just with more added context to it, it just elevates it to another level.
Yes.
So yeah, a very, very, very clear choice for Mini of the Week. But as indeed we've said for a lot of them, it's a case of where every week we agonise over who to give what to. It's why we have so many honourable mentions. So for all of these that we have featured in today's podcast, they are all excellent. All of them could have been Mini of the Week in their own right, and indeed, hopefully, we have shown you some of the, all of the better aspects. Well, probably not all of them, because as I said, we could spend hours going through them, and we would be here for hours, because probably we would do that. But as I've said before, if you want to be considered for Mini of the Week, all you have to do is join the Discord and post something in the Grand Reveal chat section, and one of the moderation team will come through and maybe pick it. And if you don't get picked one week, just post something else the next week, and you're still in with a chance to do it.
Yep.
So unless Husky want to bring anything else up, we can go into our sort of send-off thing, which I don't know what we're actually going to say for. So
We'll play it by ear.
that seems fair
No,
enough.
I was gonna say, even though we pick 2 to 3 models as our mini of the week and honorable mentions each week, the vast majority of models that get submitted as finished models in the Discord are deserving.
Oh,
It's
very
just
much so.
if we picked everybody's models, the podcast would be 6 hours long,
Which
and
I suppose,
character limits in Discord as well.
yeah, and as well, we say that with everything that is shown off, it's a case of where there is so much good stuff, but it could be that, like, we quite often you will go into the Grand Reveal channel and you'll see, oh, that's a really cool mini, and then there'll just be page after page of people already commenting on it, saying how great it is, and obviously they are excellent, and with a lot of them, we also do try to highlight some of the people that may not necessarily have been, not necessarily overlooked, but those that we just think they are really just showing off what they can do with painting, and we enjoy highlighting all of those as well. But
And
yes, I think with
I guess to add to that, we also like to highlight everybody's progress regardless of their skill level.
yes,
Because even someone who is new to painting can do something that's very impressive, and they deserve as much recognition as somebody who's been painting for 10 years.
oh yeah, it's, and in most cases probably do things better than somebody who's been painting for 10 years, because they will go into it without the sort of jadedness of knowing, right, I won't use this colour next to this one because it won't look bland, whereas somebody who's just going into a thing, great colours, put them next to each other, and it'll probably look excellent. And it's just something that somebody who has been painting probably may not take the risk for. So yeah,
Yep.
we have a vast array of things that are posted onto the channel, and they are all excellent. So even if your thing, your miniature or project that you're working on doesn't necessarily get chosen, it is still excellent, and we do enjoy seeing all of them. But I think with that, because as you can probably see by how dark it is in my room, time is ticking on, and whoever has to edit this podcast will probably hate us if we go on for much longer. So for that, we will say thank you all so much for listening. Hopefully you have enjoyed seeing the pictures as we have of talking over the top of them. And I would say who is doing it for the next month, but I don't think we've decided that yet. So whomever comes over and takes into the hot seat for the next podcast, we look forward to seeing what they are doing. And if you are a member of the Discord and you are painting something at the moment, feel free to post it, and we will see you for the next one. And hopefully, Husk and I will be back to do another of these podcasts in due time.
Yes, this won't be the last one.
Oh, assuredly not. They're going to have a hard time making us stop doing these.
Oh yes.
But with that, we shall sign off for this month, and yeah, we will see you again in the future, and do some painting. There's probably a better send off for that, but all of the YouTubers have stolen the good ones. So yeah, that'll do.
That'll work for me.
Yep. Right.
Right.
Cheerio all.